Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone attending the Planning Committee meeting today, especially those in the public gallery, and anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. To the members of the public in the gallery, I would like to remind you that this planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so there is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future. Committee members, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking, and please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic Centre car park. Thank you. We'll turn to the agenda. Item 1, attendance. If you'd all please sign the attendance register as usual. And apologies, any apologies? Rachel?
I've received apologies from Councillor Ron Burnett.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Polly, could you lead us on this? Thank you.
Chair, I would firstly remind members that you need to declare or complete the declaration of interest form in the attendance register folder if you're declaring an interest in any application. And then the following interests have been declared. Firstly, by Councillor Stuart Ashley and Councillor Faye Jones in agenda item 4, Police Training College. Agenda item 5, Monmouth Square, Cwmbran Town Centre. Agenda item 7, the former Meritor site. And agenda item 8, the Crosskillior Comprehensive School. Both Councillor Stuart Ashley and Councillor Faye Jones have declared a personal non-prejudicial interest as members of Cwmbran Community Council, which has been consulted on the application.
Additionally, not eight.
Not 8?
No.
Okay.
We're not in that area.
Okay. Not 8. I can make a note of that. And then, additionally, Councillor Stuart Ashley has declared a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 4 as a member of Torvine Friends of the Earth who've been consulted on the application. Then in relation to agenda item 6, 112 Sunnybank Road, Griffithstown, Pontypool, Councillor Norma Parish, Councillor Gaynor James and Councillor Richard Overton have declared a personal non-prejudicial interest as members of Pontypool Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. And those are all of the declarations that have been made to me prior to the meeting.
Thank you. Before we go any further, I'm going to ask the officers to introduce themselves so you'll know who is making the presentations. So, Polly, I know you've already spoken, but could you introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, I'm Polly Ellis. I'm from Legal Services.
Thank you. Rachel Beale, Democratic Services.
Richard Lewis, Head of Planning.
Paul Wielden, Group Leader Highway Development Control.
Helen Smith, Development Control.
Rebecca McAndrew, Development Management.
Craig Mead, Planning Policy.
Norman Jones, Development Management.
Thank you. Right, we go back to the agenda. Item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee of the 20th of March. Do you agree it's a true record? Somebody move them, please. Seconded. Do you want me to go through the pages, or will you vote on block that they are a true record, please? Thank you. Are there any comments or questions about these minutes? No? Okay then, thank you. We'll go to item 4 on the agenda, which is planning application 17/P/0548. The proposal is erection of 108 residential units, open space, landscaping, access and associated infrastructure, sited at the Police Training College, Green Meadow Way, Cwmbran. It's on pages 21 to 80, and there was a site inspection on Wednesday, 4th of April. And Helen Smith will take us through and give us a presentation. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the application we're considering today is a full planning application for 108 dwellings at Phase 2 of the former Police Training College. As members will be aware that Phase 1, which is currently under construction, relates to this part of the site. The whole site is allocated for residential development in the local development plan. And this application relates to Phase 2, which are these fields here, leaving Phase 3 at the end of the site. The site is allocated as a site of important nature conservation, mainly due to its grasslands. So here we have a plan showing the areas of grasslands and the hedgerows. So the application covers the development of Field 2 and Field 3, and it also covers the retention of the grasslands in Field 4, 5 and 6. Here we have some photographs. This here is Field 2. This is where approximately 3/4 of the field will be developed. And here we have another photograph of Field 2. As you can see, as the site hasn't been managed for many years, there's a lot of invasive species in this particular field. Excuse me. This is Field 3, which is also to be developed, but this is a lesser value for grasslands. Here's Field 4, which part of the northern part of the site at the top end up here will be developed. The rest will be retained and enhanced. And here we have Field 5, which is to be retained and also managed in a specific way to improve its biodiversity quality. Here we have the layout of the site. Access will be through the Phase 1 of the site, which has already been approved. The access road will continue through the site. This is Field 2. This is the area of grassland to be retained. This is Field 3, and this is Field 4 and 5 and 6 is off the plan here. During the course of the application, we've had extensive discussions with the applicant to try and address some of the concerns we had in terms of the impact on the ecology of the site. These amendments have included removal of the development in this area, which enabled these attenuation tanks. That enabled the attenuation tanks, which were to be located in Field 5, to be located in this location, which meant that we didn't need to remove any trees on this mature boundary, and also a culvert across the watercourse was no longer required. This is MG5 grassland here, but we can secure a method statement to ensure that the grasslands are preserved and protected whilst the attenuation tanks are being installed. We've also secured improved buffer zones along existing hedgerows, particularly the one along St Giles Road, and also retention of a mature oak tree in this location. This road, part of Section 106 agreement, the applicant will be provided to ensure that access can be enabled through the site into Phase 3 to allow access for that future development. There's a play area located centrally within the site, and also as part of the negotiations we've secured improvements to this recreation area, which was secured through Phase 1, and the enhanced provision will be an improved play area and also a multi-use games area. So this sort of centrally located recreation area will serve both Phase 1 and Phase 2. The house types they're a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, and they are very similar to the house types on Phase 1. So it'll be a continuation of the types of housing on that phase. And here we have a plan showing the improved recreation facilities. So we have a youth pitch to be located here, which we secured as part of Phase 1. We've got an enhanced leap and also a multi-use games area. We've also enabled some improved pedestrian connections from phase 2 to ensure that the residents can access that suitably. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Right, any questions from members? Jason?
Thank you, Chair. Given the blatant disregard that the developers showed for the hedgerows during phase 1, what assurances have you been given that that won't happen again? And how are you intending to monitor that?
Thank you, Helen.
We've had extensive discussions with the applicants regarding this. In terms of the hedgerow, it's only a small part of the hedgerow, which is adjacent to St Giles Lane, and we've had amended plans to offset the boundaries away from the hedgerow to ensure that the hedgerow is retained in its entirety, to ensure that we don't have any issues we've had on phase 1. We've also, the ecology management plan has been updated to reflect the proposals on phase 2. And through discussions with our ecologists and with the developers' ecologists, the Section 106 will ensure that the management plan is implemented. But to help us enforce any issues, we will be requesting a clause in the Section 106 to put the onus on the developer to submit an annual compliance report demonstrating how they've actually complied with the management plan.
Thank you. Any other questions, Faye?
I was just wondering, is there other ways in, or is that going to be the only way in, the one that exists already?
It's the only vehicular access into the site. There's an existing footpath here off Melbourne Court. That's not a public right-of-way. At the moment, it's an informal access point, but proposed to retain that. Because some of the residents from Melbourne Court could also use, obviously, the recreational areas, so that would provide them access through there. And that's it. And there's actually a condition ensuring that there's no other vehicle access points created on that development. It would be purely from phase 1.
I know there's not going to be vehicle access, which is good, but they're not going to break through the hedging at all to make other paths, are they? Because I am a bit concerned about the one around the edge.
The one off St Giles Road or yeah, there's no proposals to do that, and there's only the one here. If the developers do create an additional access not shown on these approved plans, and they wouldn't be complying with their planning permission. So there's no proposals to, and if they do subsequently do that, then we have control over that.
And we're going to make sure that they don't.
Yes. Yeah.
Stuart, you want to come in?
Yeah. Bearing in mind the experience we've had with the previous phase of this, we've got a significant amount of wildflower meadows, trees, etc. on this site. Bearing experience I've had elsewhere with this, what plans have we got into phase this so that we make what's the word I'm trying to think when this goes live, that we can keep an eye on this as a planning authority, because we have obviously had experience with this elsewhere. I want to make sure that this development happens without things disappearing or things happening that we're not got some control over. Bearing in mind the amount of wildflower meadows, trees, etc. on there, because, you know, we're all a bit wary about this at the moment. That's number one question. Number two question, the experience we had on the other site with the water course and water storage, how satisfied are you that this has been seen to on this part of the development?
In terms of monitoring, the mitigation required by the environmental management plan, ecological management plan, will kick in, as soon as development starts. We will be, obviously, given what the experiences we've had on phase 1, we will be making sure that we'll be in contact with the developers to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do. And also that annual monitoring report by a competent ecologist. If that highlights anything that they haven't complied with, then obviously we'll take enforcement action at that point. In terms of the watercourses, yeah, I am aware that there were issues on phase one. The drainage officer is satisfied with the technical details of the drainage proposals for this site. But again, if it's not carried out in accordance with the plan, and issues do arise, then we can take action against that.
Thank you. Jason, did you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Again, my question relates to the hedgerow activity that was carried on phase one. Were there any remedial actions put in place to reinstate any of the removed hedgerow? And were there any punitive actions taken with the developer to prevent such an episode from happening again on other sites, and to send a message that people do need to comply with planning regulations and the approved plans?
As members are aware, from the site visit that took place back at the beginning of April, there is another planning application that we received for the hedgerow at phase one to correct and mitigate the issues that occurred as part of that development. That's planning to bring that back to next planning committee for your consideration, and we can set out all the issues that that we've secured. But we have been working with the applicant for quite a long time to resolve the ecological issues that we've had on that site in the best way that we can, and this we'll present that to you at next planning committee. In terms of the experiences that we've had, one of the issues that have come out is our ability to actually monitor every single site. So that is why we're suggesting now this clause in the section 106 to put the onus on the applicant to ensure that a suitably qualified ecologist validates and confirms that they are actually complying with the mitigation proposals.
Janet first, who, and then you.
My concern following off our site visit was that although incidents occurred on the phase fund with the hedgerows and they were damaged, that despite numerous requests from residents and possibly other councillors, the developers totally ignored what was going on. And I'm really fearful that things like that could happen on this phase. I mean, can you have assurance and guarantees that it will be strictly monitored at all times?
Yeah, recognise the problems. We've been working with the developers probably for over a year on this, but we're very concerned that the outcome is the most important thing. And we believe that we've got a reasonable outcome now in terms of the previous issues. Going forward, I think we've learnt some lessons that we haven't got compliance officers, so we don't have resources to monitor sites. And therefore we've got to rely on the developer to actually implement the planning permission and meet the clauses within that. We are, as Helen has suggested, because we've got a 106 agreement on this, that we've got the opportunity of tightening that up to put the onus of monitoring on the developer, so that and all we need to then monitor is that we get these annual reports. So I'm confident going forward that we can make sure that the planning permission and all the clauses there are properly adhered to.
Richard.
Okay, Janet. That was a good answer, wasn't it? You can be confident now. Who next? And then Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would have reservations about approving any further development on this site, given the content of the report. Going back to the hedgerows again on page 39, it's been assessed as a sink habitat and UK bat priority habitats, and the hedgerow is considered to be an important hedgerow under the Hedgerow Regulations 1997 and provides habitat for a range of fauna and nesting birds and so on. I could go on quoting the rest of the paragraph, but on the previous page it says that they strongly object to the actions being taken by the developer to move that lengthy section of hedgerow, and there was the 106 agreement, as you mentioned, which the developer has contravened.
I would not be minded to approve any further development applications until the developer had actually undertaken remedial action to restore the hedgerow. It's deemed that the mitigation has been grossly inadequate and ineffective, and the report actually does say that in planning you haven't received to date a plan from the developer in terms of their proposals. So I would be strongly minded to move to say that this should be deferred until such time as the remedial action has been undertaken.
We've got other questions. Would you like to take the other questions before we come back to that issue? Steve?
Yes, my concern is reading 12 Volume Friends of the Earth, how the extent of these developments are having a severe impact on the wildlife and the destruction of the wildflower in the meadows. I mean, the more and more we're having these developments, the more it's impacted on the environmental and biodiversity. So, what's the way forward we can look, to try and stop all this?
Please, yes.
Thank you. Yes, the whole site's allocated as a site of important nature conservation, I think, but it's also an allocated site for residential development for up to 350 dwellings. The policies in the local plans say that you can develop site sinks, but any losses has to be adequately mitigated. So in this site, if I go back to... Oh, wrong way, sorry. I'll show you the... Right, so these are the grasslands, these fields here. And the application site covers this field, this one, and this one, and this one. They're developing approximately, probably slightly over 3/4 of this field here, and this field, but also the northern part of this field. What the proposal, so these are varying in quality of grasslands, and they haven't been managed for many years. And if they continue not to be managed, the quality of the grasslands can decline, because MG5 grassland needs a specific form of management to improve its quality. So whilst they're losing a certain quantity, they're actually, by implementing the ecological management plan, they're actually improving the quality of the field 5 is actually a good quality field, so they're going to be maintaining and managing that to ensure the quality doesn't deteriorate. Field 4 and 6, they're still important grasslands, but they're not as important quality, or not as high quality. But in managing them in a specific way, that will improve the quality of those fields from a biodiversity point of view. So although you're losing quantity, you're actually improving quality of the biodiversity of the grasslands on this site. And our ecologist and NRW are satisfied that that's adequate mitigation to offset the loss of some of the grasslands.
Thank you, Helen. Is that okay, Steve? Yeah. Right. Faye, you want to come in again?
I've noticed that there are some trees to be felled. Are there any trees on the hedge between the existing houses and the new houses going to be felled?
On which part, sorry? Along here? Yes. There are a few on the edge. I'll get you back to the layout. They are actually shown on it, you can't see it on here, they're very faintly red line, but majority of trees to be removed will be in this location to enable the access road. This is a substantial tree belt. There are one or two sort of along the inner edge, but none of these significant trees along here to be removed. There are a couple along here as well, again on the inner edge of the tree belt.
It's just my concern now that they're going to thin out that hedge between the existing houses and the new planned houses if you do take a few trees down. I'm not happy with
the management plan. It's only one or two individual ones, so it shouldn't thin out that tree belt. And part of the management plan also ensures the retention of those trees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, fine. Who was indicated first, then you, Steve?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for permitting me to come back in again. I am concerned by the observation that was made from the top earlier in terms of the lack of enforcement officers. And it's one thing to say that there are promises or commitments to enhance the biodiversity of the neighbouring grassland area, but how can we be given cast iron guarantees that those commitments will be honoured when earlier commitments that have been laid out under 106 agreements have not been honoured?
Yeah, I understand how you feel. Do you want to come in with this one, Richard?
Well, only to repeat what we've said, we will tighten the 106 agreement up as far as possible. We're well aware of the previous issues. We can't give a cast iron guarantee that the developers won't comply with the conditions, but we do have action that we can take. So there's no question that if the council wants to take action, we can certainly take action to make sure that those clauses are abided by.
Okay, who? Steve and then Jason have indicated.
Yeah, mine's a highways one on page 47. On the first recommendation, you oppose the application in the current form, and you then on page 48 said that it's acceptable. Why is that changed? Considering there's going to be a lot of traffic coming to and fro from there, particularly for the building work.
Right, Highways Officer Paul will come in on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I had to reiterate a concern that I've always had about this development, and that was that there wasn't a secondary access into the development. But nevertheless, it had a consent previously with only one access point. There's no question that the layout and all the internal layouts I'm satisfied with. Within the comments within the report, as you say, you'll first see that I raise concern again. I did oppose it on the basis that the internal layout needed some alterations. I wasn't satisfied with the parking requirements. I wasn't satisfied with some of the highway layouts. Subsequently, then they amended the plan, thankfully, and then I was happy with the layout. I'm still happy with the layout, but the earlier comment regarding secondary access to the site, I lost that battle, I'm afraid, because it had a planning consent without it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Jason, do you want to come in with your question now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Two quick points. The first one is just building on what Councillor Bevan said earlier. The company or the developer would have a social and corporate responsibility process. I would expect that what's happened in this case has fallen short of that. I would expect to see some kind of remedial action and at least some kind of an apology to the people of the ward for removing something they consider so precious before we would grant approval to another phase. My second point, and this is more of a practical issue, I get a lot of messages from people moving into development saying that the properties they're purchasing don't come with the bins required to meet Torvine standards, so they have to then pay Torvine to get those bins, which takes a number of weeks, which accumulates waste over that period. Could we ask the developer to include those bins within each of the properties? Thank you.
Would you like to answer that, Helen?
Yes, thank you. We've actually got a condition attached requiring bin store details to be provided, and our waste department's comments did say that the developers would have to purchase the bins. So I've had passed those comments on to them when we first received them. It's not something that the planning can do, is insist on they actually provide the physical bins, but we can certainly pass that on to the developer.
Thank you, Helen.
Can I come in and deal with the other question?
Yeah, Stuart wants to come in. Do you want to do that at the end? Yeah, Stuart, you want to come in now?
I'm beginning to read more and more on this, on the ecology of this site. There's 2 or 3 things here that worry me, to be quite honest. One, we talked about the grassland, so-called unimproved grassland, and you said things about this land being managed, being better. When I'm reading inspectors' reports in here about unimproved land, they talk about species management. Unimproved grassland is actually better in some respects. Management depends on what species you're looking at. And then the other problem I've got here, I'm looking at bats, I'm looking at badgers, I'm hearing people on the planning committee talk about trees. There's a lot of things here, not just talking about hedges on the proximity of this. This is beginning to worry me. I think we need further ecological exploration of this site before we go anywhere, really. I'm worrying about this site. I walked up there when we were looking at it the other day. We couldn't get on there. We couldn't have a look at it. I'd like to go back on this, if I would, please, because I'm not happy with this. I'm not saying we stop it. I think we need a little bit more explanation. The other thing, Paul said something about parking. We've been here before on this one. It's a very, very long road. Incredibly long road when I look at it, for the amount of traffic this can have. The first phase worked okay, maybe. We had problems there, if I remember rightly, getting people in, and I'm starting to see things on. So there's several questions I got before we go anywhere with this, to be honest. I'd like some further information before we approve this.
Right, we'll have to see what the time scale is. I'll ask the officers
I'm not happy with it, to be
what they
honest.
think, to go back and have more information.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you. Just to go back to your point about unimproved grasslands and management, they are 2 distinct. My understanding is that unimproved grassland relates to land that hasn't been cultivated over the years for sort of intensive agriculture. And when I mentioned management plan, it's a way of managing the field, not improving the cultivation of it. It's just it improves the quality by specific forms of management. It's cutting, at certain times of the year. This site has been subject to extensive ecological assessment and extensive discussions. This is the main issue for this site, and we've been discussing this since last July. And our ecologists did have some, major concerns about this, but through the amendments that we've sought and the improvements we've got in the ecological management plan, the ecologist is now satisfied, given that it's an allocated site, that the mitigation proposed is acceptable.
Does that satisfy you, Stuart? It doesn't.
I'd like our council ecologists to come and talk to us about this, if possible.
Is that possible? I'll ask the head of planning.
Yeah, the only thing I can say with that, there's a lot of detail that's gone on since July, a lot of meetings, obviously far too much detail than we could bring to planning committee. If you notice on the ecologist comments, he's talking about this particular report being version 9, so there's been a lot of work put into those big reports. He's vetted all those reports. We've gone back and got further information. And all I can say to committee, whilst we are not experts on ecology, we have used our own ecologists, who I believe the members do respect, and he has given this a sign-off, saying that he's quite happy that the balance has been struck here, and that he's happy that the mitigation proposed is entirely satisfactory. Now, obviously, if members want to defer the application, I can't stop them doing that. But there's a level of detail that we're never going to be able to bring to members on all those issues without taking an awful lot of time. So that's why we do it in this way. Steve, our ecologist, has submitted his comments. They're all documented in the report. And in the assessment, we've tried to summarise all the ecological mitigation for members to make their decision. I believe there's enough information in here for members to take the decision if they want to. That's all I can really say, Chair.
Right, does that satisfy you, Stuart?
let's put it this way, I suppose that I have to have Steve has said that. But what I'm trying to say here is it's probably the most complex ecological thing I've seen on the planning committee. I suspect, what other members think? And I don't want to be sat here listening to what we did with phase 1, that's all.
Yes, I can understand how you feel about phase 1, but are you satisfied now for us to move on, or do you want to defer it?
I think I'd better, but otherwise I'll be... I think I'll go with that.
We'll go with that. Right, thank you.
Paul can answer the highways issue.
There was a highways issue in with that, so the highways officer will answer.
I need to hear what the highways officer has to say about amazingly long road, and I will also pass my usual observation about how you get down there walking and cycling, because we did also raise that issue when down to the, I looked at the map again, and there is an issue about how you get down to town other than other ways.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor. The highway layout within the development is well within the capacity to take the amount of traffic that will be there. The junction onto Green Meadow Way is well within its capacity. When I was talking about a secondary access onto the development, I was talking about another way of bringing people down into town. But even the access from Green Meadow Way isn't a significant distance down into town. So I'm satisfied that the capacity of the highway within this development is well within its capacity to take the amount of traffic within the development. The junction onto Green Meadow Way is well within its capacity to take the traffic associated with the development as well. So even though I've said previously that I would like a secondary access into the development, it had a planning consent previously without a secondary access, and as I said, I would have liked it. It was a preference. It wasn't an essential part of this development. It's something that I would have preferred. I didn't get it. I had to move on and get something that was acceptable here, and it is acceptable. Likewise, we worked, I know you had the issue regarding the accesses onto the lane at the top of the site. That lane links directly into Cwmbran. It's a short distance, and it's a good walking and cycling route from this development into the town. There are a number of other access points, walking access points into this development. There's the main access off Green Meadow Way. Green Meadow Way's been traffic calmed. We've got an additional Section 106 agreement and some money from the site to extend the traffic calming where it finishes now up to the frontage of the site on Green Meadow Way. So all in all, I think that the layout of this development has good walking links into the site. It certainly has a good green, quiet lane down into the town centre for cyclists, walking and horses. So I was satisfied overall that this is a development that links itself into the surrounding network, which achieves good sustainability from a highways and traffic standpoint. So it wasn't something that I was really digging my heels in about this secondary access. It was a preference, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Does that satisfy you, Stuart? Right, I've got a load of hands up now. Jason, Janet, Faye, and then Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I'm following the discussions we've had here today and analysing the documents. I'm minded not to support the application at this time. And it's not from an infrastructure point of view. I think the developer in this case has shown quite a disregard for the local community, for the people within St Giles and Green Meadow. And I'd like to see evidence that they've changed their process so that they can't just accept £1,000 fine for removing a hedgerow and carry on to their benefit. I would like to see some evidence that they've learned a lesson and that it won't happen again in the future.
Okay, Jason. Richard will come in on the...
Yeah, a few members have picked up that point. I understand the concern that really the remediation should take place before anything else happens. but they are two distinct developments. Although this is phase 2, and it's the same developer, shares the same access, this scheme is a scheme in its own right that members will need to decide on its own merits without considering other developments. Now, we can take, and we could have taken enforcement action on the hedgerow, and if members were concerned about that, I know that members are concerned about that, we can deal with that separately without deferring or refusing the current application. From my point of view, I've been personally involved in the hedgerow issue. It's been going on, as I say, for over a year, and I would share members' frustration, having been involved in it. But I believe that we have come a long way. We have to decide, do we take enforcement action, or do we work with the developer? There's about 4 officers that's been involved in this at great length, and we believe that we could have got the best outcome by dealing with it in the way that we did. It was much longer than we would have wanted, but we believe that was the best route at that time. So I understand members' concerns, and that application will hopefully come to members in June, and members will then be made aware of what the proposals are for the remediation of the hedgerow to make that decision. But in terms of the current application, my view would be that you couldn't use this application to in some way punish the developer for what has happened on the previous scheme. We could, as I say, we can still take action on that, but from an officer's point of view, we believe that we are trying to get the best outcome for that particular scheme. This scheme, on its own merits, needs to be decided separately, in my view. I'd just leave that with members then.
Are you okay with that, Jason? Do you understand that? Thank you. Janet?
Thank you. We all straight concerns about the ecology, but no one's mentioned about the possible archaeological buried remains that are on the site. And I see on page 46 that it says that no development should take place until the applicant has secured agreement for a written scheme of historic environment to identify and record features. Has this been done, or has this come under consideration by our officers?
Thank you, Janet. Helen, thank you.
This is a condition that we've attached to the Planning Commission, if it's granted. It's condition number 22, which is on page 76. So the developer won't be able to start any work until they've done that, and they have to come into us and discharge that work for us to agree before they can start. So we can have all that in place before they start the development.
Again, we'd like insurance that that can be done in view of the failings on other developments. Thank you.
Are you okay with that, Janet? Thank you. Faye?
I'm still concerned about the trees, and I just wondered, could you show us on that map exactly which trees they are?
It's probably I can't on this plan. I can't identify the individual ones, but I can show you the groups. There is a group. There are obviously a couple here to create the access from phase 1. There are some groups around here. You've got another. It forms part of this larger tree belt, but it's only the ones which are sort of sticking out to that tree belt. Some of them, they're not mature ones, some of them are seedlings, which they're just clearing. And then there's also 1 or 2 along here, but again on the inner edge of the tree belt.
I did think that road already existed the way in, and that there would be nothing else done with that bit.
The road, the area has been cleared up to this point, and some of the trees just inside the site has been cleared. I haven't been up to the site recently, but I am aware that some more tree clearance has taken place before the bird breeding season. So some of them have taken, but not all of them.
Okay,
thank you, Faye. Hugh?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for permitting me to come back in a third time. I was looking through some of the smaller print in the report, some of the stuff I hadn't picked up on earlier, and there's representations made by Friends of the Earth there, Sorry, apologies, I've lost the page that it was on now. But basically, it was saying that we agree that the grassfield sites should not have been characterised as land suitable for development under Torvine's local development plan. When it says we, is that Friends of the Earth stating that, or is that Torvine agreeing with Friends of the Earth that it shouldn't have been designated as a development field? And if this phase 2 gets the go-ahead and is completed, what assurances do we have that there will be no further proposed developments on the other grassland sites adjacent to the development site? That's the first question. And the second one, there seems to be some sort of concessions made to the developer in terms of the fact that they said that there was 30% social housing. I want confirmation that that 30% is still hard and fast, set in stone figure, or has that changed? Has there been any divergence on that figure, given that the number of original dwellings has been reduced from 400 and something to 300 and something? And there was also concerns in the report about the lack of consultation with the RSL, because the size of the units designated for social housing seemed to be smaller than the Welsh Government guidelines. Thank you.
Okay. Helen, would you like to answer that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the comments from Torvine Friends of the Earth, that's a direct quote from them. They don't believe that it should have been allocated in the first place for residential development. But obviously it's Torvine that have allocated the site for residential development, so that's coming from them. In terms of further development on the grasslands, it forms part of the mitigation, the retention of those grasslands. So whilst we can't stop them from coming in with a planning application, it would highly unlikely be supported, because that's part of the mitigation land, and they wouldn't be able to provide any alternative mitigation for the loss of those fields. So whilst we can't stop them coming in with an application, it wouldn't be acceptable from a planning point of view, and obviously the council have the powers to refuse it on that basis. In terms of the affordable housing, obviously, because it's been done in phases, we are ensuring that it's compliant with our SPG in terms of the 30%. So phase 1 secured 30%, and phase 2 have secured 30%. And it does take into account the reduction in the numbers down to 108. I think it's 32.4 of dwellings. So the 0.4, they're providing a financial contribution for that 0.4 rather than one whole unit. In terms of the comments, in terms of the RSLs, there may be some discrepancies with some of the sizes of some of the social rented properties. However, these are properties that we've accepted on phase 1. So as part of Section 106 agreement, we will be having discussions with our housing officer and the nominated RSL to address those issues.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer and answering all of the questions. With regards to the answer you've given on the second question on the adjacent grasslands, I'm wondering, is it possible for us to redesignate that within the LDP so that it's prohibited from any future development?
No, I think the point is that in this particular scheme it was designated for residential development, but there was recognition at that time that a substantial area of grassland would need to be retained. So what this development is doing is retaining it. We can never stop applications coming in, as Helen says, for more residential development. Highly unlikely in the circumstances that we will be looking to support that, but obviously the final say rests with members anyway. So in the years to come, if we ever did have an application, members have the choice whether to approve that or refuse it.
Okay, who?
Well, kind of. It doesn't give me the peace of mind that I was looking for. I mean, the officers have decided that it should only accommodate the 300 odd houses instead of the 400. I would have liked to have seen, though I know it's not in this particular application for consideration at this time, but as part of it, it is having this boundary, this green area, and I would have loved to have seen that protected, really, because effectively the site is being used now, isn't it? We allocated the site in the LDP initially for 400 odd houses. We're now saying it's got to be reduced to 350. Really, that should be the end of, and no further development should be permitted after that. Phase 2 is completed. I would have liked to have seen that area of grassland protected, really, and removed from the LDP, because the site has been utilised for what it was in the LDP.
In terms of the LDP, obviously, as you earlier in Council, we went through the LDP review reports. The LDP will begin its review now. In terms of the current LDP, that will remain in force till the 31st of March 2021. So an application can be submitted in accordance with the LDP, and you'd have to determine it on its current status rather than any future status. In terms of any additional development, if it comes in after 2021, would have to be considered via any new plan application and any candidate site process. So the developer of any additional phase can submit a candidate site and we would assess it at that time. But the LDP will remain in force to determine plan applications until the 31st of March 2021. So you would consider it in line with its current allocation. But any changes could be made if nothing happens in the replacement LDP, but that current LDP will still be a determination for plan applications.
Okay.
I'm really sorry, Chair. So just for clarification, you couldn't do anything now under the current LDP, but given that the Council voted this morning to work on a revised LDP, what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it might be possible within the terms of the revised LDP to do something along the lines that I'm suggesting.
Potentially consider how it's developed. The grassland that's Helen's showing there is currently in the urban boundary. We could potentially look at how that grassland's retained there, but that's only going forward. Any decision, any application that came in between now and 31st of March 2021 would have to be determined in accordance with the current LDP and the way its site's allocated.
Are you satisfied now, Harry? Thank you. Richard Overton, you wanted to come in?
Yes, very briefly, Madam Chair. I have listened to the questions and the very concise and relevant answers given by the officers. I am now weighing up my response to this application when we come to the vote. As we know, the area of land is designated for housing on the current LDP. Yes, members have expressed concerns about environmental issues, but I think that the officers have addressed those very well, and in my mind, any caveats I had about this application have been dismissed by the excellent reports of the officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for that. Stuart, did you want to come in again?
Yeah, I mean, Hugh actually does raise a point, which is if we've got protected species and we've got species, what aspect of this site is going to remain protected? What aspect of this site is going to remain greenfield? Because we come back to the LDP, we come back to the greenfield mitigation sites. I'm not clear about this. I did say this earlier, and we've got trees, hedges, grasslands, etc. on this site, and we're going to have a load of houses put on what is a valuable site. It uses different language, but it's very similar to South Sebastopol in terms of what is there. And I'm not clear. I'm clear what is valuable habitat. I'm not clear how developing houses onto a site. Bearing in mind, we've also things like the well-being of future generations, and we've also got stuff like the climate change as well. building on sites, and I appreciate we've also got the dichotomy because, of the fact that we need accommodation. How much of this is social housing, etc. I know we've got to weigh that up. I'm very well aware of that. So the problem we have is what limited sites we've got and what is the balance between that. That I know is what we've got to look at. So how do you convince us what habitat we've got left there? You know?
Right, who would like to clarify? Yes, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, in terms of the habitat that's retaining, obviously we in developing phase 1, because that was a brownfield site, that was a less contentious. So we tried to get as many properties on there as that was acceptable. In terms of this site here, there's the loss of 2 fields. So the remaining 4 fields are to be retained and enhanced from a biodiversity point of view. So the habitat, not just the retention of the grasslands, but also the hedgerows and the landscape boundaries. So as part of, we have also got phase 3, which is further down here, but that would have to come. If the planning application came through for phase 3 in the future, that would have to be considered separately. But as part of this site, obviously 3/4 of this field is to be developed. We've also tried to ensure that where possible the landscaping boundaries are retained and as ecological corridors. So my view is, and also the ecologist's views, is that what's going to be left is, once the management plan is in place and the site's being managed, it will be retention of the MG5 in Field 5. It's the improvement of the grasslands in Field 4 and 6 to enable it to come up to MG5 quality. So we will then have hopefully three fields of MG5 quality. But we've also secured, by the amendments removing the attenuation tanks from Field 5, we've been able to ensure that the integrity of this landscape ecological corridor, and there's a watercourse running through there, which the original proposal was to have a big culvert across that for the pipes to go to the attenuation tanks. They're now gone from the development, so that has secured significant improvements to that, the retention of that ecological corridor. What's also we've agreed as well is that originally, when if the site has been allocated through the LDP, the access road, the long road, was proposed to carry on round through into phase 3 and then back round the bottom part of phase 2 and back into field 2, which had been developed. Whilst that was a good highway solution, it was considered that ecologically that would completely isolate the important ecological features of the site, the mature boundaries plus the grasslands. So we've agreed to remove that from the development to ensure that we can still enable the connectivity of the ecology through the site and obviously out of the site to the watercourse to the south. So eventually, currently this application is the retention of those fields, the improvements of those fields. Yes, you are losing some quantity of MG5, but the enhancements will improve the quality of what's there. Also, the improvements, the amendments to the scheme has enabled ecological connectivity to be retained through the site. But long term, should phase 3 come forward in the future, there will be some further grasslands in there would also need to be protected, but that would have to be considered at that time when updated surveys are done on those particular grasslands.
Thank you, Helen. Does that clarify the situation for you, Councillor Ashley? Yes?
So we are maintaining the water course down through there as a green corridor. That's one thing you're saying. And we're maintaining green meadow space down through there as well. But obviously not as much because you're building houses on the rest of it. That's what you're saying. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? Is there a proposal from someone? Jason?
Thank you, Chair. To my mind, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. I think we're all on the fence with this one, so I would like to move that we defer this one, requesting some further information on assurances of the biodiversity aspect, and as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to see the process improvements to make sure that they stick to the plans.
Second that as well.
Right, there's a seconder. Would you like to vote on that? Now this is for deferral, for more information for the committee. Right, can I have a show of hands? That's unanimous. This application has been deferred. That one. Change. Right, we move to agenda item 5, which is application 17P 0963, and the proposal is for infilling of the water gardens and associated removal of 9 number trees to provide new event space, hard and soft landscaping improvements, including 18 number semi-mature trees and a new cafe, sited at Monmouth Square, Cwmbran Town Centre. And it's on pages 81 to 94. And Rebecca McAndrew now is going to give us a presentation on this. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. As we just heard, the application is to infill the existing water gardens in Cwmbran Town Centre and to redevelop that area as a more modern public realm. These are the plans of the proposal. So the existing water gardens would be infilled. Events area would be created in the northern part of the site, and then a green space would be created in the southern part of the site, which would include a cafe. The scheme proposes the removal of 9 trees, but it's proposed to replant 18 trees in the green space here, and this existing sugar maple would also be retained within the development. Here's the elevations of the proposed cafe, quite a modern looking building with a glass elevation looking out onto that public space. Here's an existing photo of the water garden, so it's fallen into decline over recent years and is currently closed to the public. Another photo there. And these are the proposed artist impressions of the scheme. You can see here the green space, the public event space, and here the cafe with the glass elevation looking out onto this green planted area. Again, the green planted area with the event space, and again there. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions? Who first? Then Stuart.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am very sad that M&G have allowed the gardens to decline to the state they are, because I thought that was a beautiful feature when the waterfall was working. It was a very attractive feature. In fact, it's the only bit of what I would call civic amenity space within the whole of the Cwmbran Town Centre. I'm absolutely appalled by this application for putting in yet another cafe. There's 3 cafes within 100 yards of where this proposed cafe is going to be, which is the Costa on the corner, upstairs cafe and Marks and Spencer's, and there's a new patisserie cafe again within walking distance of this. I really feel sad that Torfaen haven't been able to exert greater influence on M&G in the past, for them to have installed disabled ramps and maintained the gardens in a working status. It's sad, but it seems to be that the trend with these applications coming through is we'll refrain from spending money on it, let it fall into decline, and then we'll submit an application to do away with it. We've had multiple objections to this particular planning application from local residents living in Monmouth House. The trees are protected by tree preservation orders, and I think it makes a mockery of Torvine's tree policy to allow developers to cut down mature trees that are protected by tree preservation orders, and then to try and say that they'll replant new trees which are non-native species. We're doing away with mature UK species to look to plant an American bubblegum tree, whatever that is. I do believe that this is in direct contravention of Welsh Government planning for Future Generations Act and sustainability, and I believe this application is also in direct contravention to Torvine's stated policies of being a cleaner and greener borough, and with specific regard to the LDP as well. I believe that it is in direct contravention of Torvine's adopted development plan, and I shall refer to the sections. It's S2 and S10. Basically, funnily enough, these sections are actually quoted in regards to the previous planning application. On page 32 of the report, members will see Torvine LDP objective states to protect and enhance the valued landscape character of Torvine, including open space and sense of rurality between settlements. This does provide a valued landscape and character of Torvine and open space for residents, in my opinion. Sorry, I said 2 and 10, it's 2 and 12, I meant to say. And section 2, to promote the health and well-being through outdoor recreational opportunities which should be accessible to all. So I believe for all of those reasons it's in direct contravention with the LDP, with what the Welsh Government has intended in their legislation, and within Torvine's corporate plan as well. So there's absolutely no way I could support this application.
Right, would you like to comment on that, Rebecca? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to come back to your concerns about the water garden going, a report has been submitted in support of the application to say that the water feature doesn't work anymore. There's issues with the drainage system on it. It isn't feasible to reinstate it. I agree that in its heyday, it was beautiful the way the water trickles through and everything, so I recognise your concerns there. There's also disabled access issues which the applicants have said are difficult to overcome as well, so that's another consideration. In terms of the loss of the trees, obviously we don't like to lose trees, but the authority's tree officer hasn't raised objections to this proposal because he considers that there's only limited lifespan of the trees where they're planted at the moment because their root balls are quite compacted into those gardens, and he accepts that replanting double the number of trees, which would have a longer life now, would in the long run be an improvement. Your concerns about recognise losing an existing public realm, but it's being replaced with another form of public realm rather than developing on it. So on balance, while it's a shame to lose those water gardens, we think that it's probably on balance acceptable. Thank you.
Yes.
You say it's unfeasible to maintain the gardens. Does that imply that Torvine planning officers have undertaken a full feasibility study of the site, or is that just something that M&G is saying in terms of their view on whether it's feasible or not? The site should have been maintained properly. You say about it not being a loss of open space, But in fact, when you look at it, over 50% of the new site will be taken up by a new cafe. So there is a loss of open space there. So I'm sorry, Rebecca, but I would disagree with you on those 2 points.
Yes, please, Rebecca.
Yeah, just to clarify, a report was submitted in support of the application, which explains why the retention of the gardens wasn't feasible. In terms of the cafe, that's one of the things that we've looked for as planning officers, because if I go back to the layout, we were concerned that one of the problems with this space is that this area up here isn't used at the moment. I think the cinema's closed and it's just the former inn shop, they're called something else now. So what we were concerned about was if this area here was just planted, that people probably wouldn't use it. So in terms of enlivening a public space, it's good practice to put a use in there that would draw people there. So, I think it would actually be beneficial to have this cafe there to draw people up into this green landscape area.
Again, I need clarification on the report was submitted. Was that commissioned by M&G, that report? And secondly, with regards to access to the new space, is that going to be open to all the general public, or is that going to only be open to customers of that particular cafe? Because I personally have had an instance where I sat at some tables in Cwmbran recently, just the other week, and was asked to move on because I hadn't purchased anything from that particular shop. And the concerns I've got, whilst the gardens have been temporarily closed now, in the past they have been provided free access from not just visitors, people shopping in the town centre, but certainly the residents of Monmouth House as well. And the concern I've got is any new space, there'd be restrictions on utilising that space unless you were a customer of the particular cafe.
Well, there might be seating in other parts of it too, and the officer will explain it to us now, I'm sure.
If I just come back to the artist's impression, so while there would be seating outside directly related to the cafe, can you see it on here? You can sort of see it. So there would be seating directly related to the cafe, but there's these retaining planter walls. So my hope would be that people would sort of get stuff from the cafes and spill out into that area, and other people could take their lunch, and go and sit round on those planters as well. So those green areas would be open to all. But obviously there may be tables specifically relating to the cafe immediately in front of it, but there would be plenty of seating within the wider public realm for everybody to use.
Would we be able to put in a 106 agreement to make sure that part of the space was left open for all of the public?
I don't know whether it would apply to this. The officers will explain it to us, I'm sure.
I mean, the application is for improved public realm, so it would be the whole ethos behind this is public realm, so public realm open for the public.
Right, shall we move on? I got other hands going up. Stuart and then Jason would like to ask questions.
We discussed this at the Community Council, and all the councillors there were in agreement that this should be done. I make that point because it's written in the report. I had some reservations, but they're not down the lines of the potential of the water garden, because at the moment it's a useless space, to be blunt about it. The main problem you have with it is getting nearer it because it's surrounded by smokers. And that's my main concern about any public space in Cwmbran Town Centre, is the policing of the smokers. As much as I had reservations about this, it does seem an equitable use of space, because the water gardens, if you certainly read about it online, they talk about the water gardens in the old days. They used to fill it up with bubbles, and that was the sport. That's long gone because it doesn't function anymore. There's some nice bits in here about some of the features that relate to it. And the architect of Cwmbran Town Centre was the guy that lived up in the flats above. And some of the stuff that's in here, I do agree with the report that says about recycling it. We'd like to see some of the stuff out of the town centre because a lot of that art was part of the Cwmbran Arts Trust. Along with the bandstand and the other things, which I wasn't allowed to talk about last meeting, needs to be recycled. And I totally agree with whoever wrote that there, because some of that is the heritage of Cwmbran. It is 50 years old, and I wouldn't want to lose that. There's a lot of art and art-type stuff and materials that could be well used around the town if MG does want to, the things don't use it. The other thing is, I do somewhat agree with you about some of the trees and things there. They are well thought about by people in Cwmbran, and if they can come out of there and be planted somewhere else in Cwmbran, that would be quite valuable. The same with materials, because they can also be used. We'd love to use, So recycling what's there, if we're going to do away with it, and some of the stuff would be a valuable thing. That's something you can take back to the developers of this. The other aspect of it, American gumbo trees, I did actually go and look them up in the RHS thing. As long as they're the ones that are not fruiting, and I did ask somebody about this, I won't say who, but I did. As long as they're the ones that don't actually produce the fruits, they are actually quite an attractive tree, and that do look remarkably like sycamores or the maples. But I might also agree with you, I would, if we had something similar that was native, I would have a preference personally for that. There are quite a few trees in the RHS guide that are very similar, Royal Horticultural Society, for those who don't know, that would fulfil the same thing. So if we've got a native British tree or native Welsh tree that would fulfil the thing, I would have a preference to seeing that as well. I don't disagree with you on that at all. That was one thing that struck me with that. Why do we have to have an American gumbo tree? Because I'm pretty certain we've got lots of trees in this country that fulfil the same thing. What I might think is because somebody saw that in their architectural guide, this is a nice tree to have in a town centre, and it probably is the most fashionable one, and they might, for instance, have it in a certain town down the road. I'll rest my see what your observations are on that one.
Would you like to make observations about that, Rebecca? Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. As we said in the officer's report, we think that public art would enrich that space and it would add to more character, more individuality, sort of telling the story about Cwmbran, and also those water gardens. So we suggested the condition which would cover moving the existing statues within the water gardens and where they would go, also considering reusing some of the material potentially in public art. I know the glass in the water feature, I think it was from Pilkington's originally, so that could be, I quite like the sort of concrete pattern on the back of where the water fountain was, I don't know whether that could be used. And I've suggested also maybe interpretation panels or some sort of interpretation to tell the story of what was there once and how that fits into the history of Cwmbran. So that's one condition. In terms of the replanting the trees, I've discussed it briefly with our tree officer, and I think that's probably unfeasible, and it's difficult just with developments in general. If you start messing around with trees, it tends to impact upon them and it's hard for them to survive. So that's probably unfeasible in this instance. In terms of the choice of trees to be replanted, I think that the developer specified 4 potential trees. I won't begin to pronounce them because some of them are Latin. One of them was the American gumball tree. I know that we've discussed about the gumballs and potential for falling. We put that to the applicants and they said that they intend to undertake an audit for pros and cons of each variety they're looking at and their ultimate suitability for each proposed location. So they're going to look into the type of tree to be planted in a bit more detail before they make a final decision. I've also discussed with the authority's landscape officer and our tree officer, and they're fairly happy with the proposed suggested varieties.
Can I just come back very briefly? Yes. I want to come back very briefly and say there is quite a lot of public art floating around in Cwmbran Town Centre. If you go to Lantana Grange. There's a lot of it over there. So it was paid for by the Arts Trust and various other people. So there is actually stuff there that could be relocated there. Certainly reflects the last 50 years of Cwmbran public art. So we're not putting the clock back there because that doesn't go, things like that. But certainly some public art and some new public art that they might want to sponsor, I think would be welcome, because that was always a tradition in Newtown, and maybe it's something that needs to go there, rather than having some bland city centre stuff that we see elsewhere.
I definitely agree. It'd be good to have public art that reflects the heritage of Cwmbran and the town centre.
Right, thank you. Jason?
Thank you, Chair. I perhaps want to take a polar opposite view to my colleague down the front and just say that I'm delighted with the fact that MG are investing in our town centre. I think it's long overdue, and take my hat off to them for bringing the town centre up to a more modern standard. The water feature, I don't believe, has worked since the early 1990s, as far as I'm aware. So any plan to reuse or redesignate that space into something more useful, I think should be welcome. My question relates to the stairwell on the left-hand side of the gardens as it is now. Is that being retained for access to the underground car park? Because I believe that's used quite heavily at the moment.
Yeah, that's being retained. You can see it sort of tucked away there behind the cafe. So that would be retained as part of the scheme.
Any more questions? Here, I'll take Richard first, because you've had a good go, and you can go after Richard, okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Did I say it wrong?
No, you didn't.
Oh,
You said it right.
We'll have Richard first.
It's just an observation, Madam Chairman. I've often considered Cwmbran's Civic Square to be Gwent Square and not Monmouth Square, which is why at a previous planning meeting I suggested a better feature for street theatre in that square rather than on the current water garden. But listening to what has been said, it does not appear that if we turn this application down, the water garden could be recommissioned or reinstated. So I've done a bit of a about-face here, because I came into the meeting with the same reservations as my colleague, but now I understand that we can't turn back 20 years and see it operational. So I changed my mind on the application, Madam Chairman.
Right, thank you, Richard. That was a comment more than a question, wasn't it? Thank you for that. Who do you want to come in now, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I would disagree with the councillor up the back there who says, about the investment that M&G are making, because if M&G had invested in maintaining this site, then we wouldn't be in this position now, would we? So I disagree with that comment in terms of the investment that they've made. I'm rather cynical on it that they wanted to just get another business in there and they can charge some more rent and derive some more rental income. Nothing against M&G. I think they manage that site very exceptionally well, and when any of the stores become vacant, they're not vacant for very long. But the point that Stuart was making about the trees and the nature of the species of the trees. This is, I know he's very in with all the ecological stuff, but this was brought up by an Officer for Natural Resources Wales, in that planning in Torfaen should be more minded
are mindful of the not just the replanting of trees where they're cut down, but the type and nature and species of the tree that is being replanted and where it is within the environment, because each trees, I'm not an expert, but they have completely different characteristics. So that was where that came from in terms of the native species. This was brought to our attention by the officer from Natural Resources Wales.
Thank you. I don't think you need an answer to that, do you? Because the officer has gone over the tree situation quite thoroughly. Right, are there any more questions? Comments? Right. Anybody want to make a proposal? Right, thank you. So you are proposing approval? Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. No, that's okay.
Chair, can I ask that we have a recorded vote, please?
Recorded vote. You have to have, I think it's 6 people agreeing with you for that, and nobody's put their hand up. Does anyone else want a recorded vote? No, I'm sorry, they haven't supported that. I'll ask the legal officer. I believe you need support for that. Right, thank you. So we'll have to have a show of hands, okay? You know, you need support for that. 6 hands have to go up, and they didn't go up. Okay, who? Right, we've had a proposal to approve it, and it's been seconded. Would you like to show me your approval or otherwise? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 12. 4 against. 1 against. Any abstentions? No. So that application has been approved. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is application 18P0065. The proposal is for creation of vehicle access, formation of dropped curb and parking area sited at 112 Sunnybank Road, Griffithstown, and is on pages 95 to 102. We had a site inspection on the 4th of April. And Sarah Hensby is now going to give us a presentation on this. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair said, this application has been subject to a committee site visit. So for those of you who weren't at the site visit, if I just go through the actual proposal. The proposal is for the hard standing to the front of the property to be extended and to be for a drop curb to be put in to allow vehicles to park parallel to the actual highway. As you can see from this is the existing hard standing area with a ramp down, and the proposal is to actually cover up the whole of the area with a drop curb actually covering the whole of the actual lengthway. So this is the actual site at the moment, with the pedestrian access in and the actual retaining wall above the hard standing at the moment. That's also a close-up actually showing the relationship with the neighbouring property and the front window of the existing property. This is also the actual application site. You can just see on this photo here opposite where there is actually already a hard standing, a much larger hard standing. This actually shows further along the street where it is accepted that there are hard standings and driveways on the street, but because of the different types of properties along the street, the relationship with the highway and the amount of space at the front of properties actually differs. So obviously here you can see how a car is actually parked at 90 degrees from the actual highway and not actually parallel with the actual highway. This again is the application site, so this is looking in the opposite direction, actually towards Pontypool, with the actual hard standing area in there. And this again is opposite, where there's actually a larger space for vehicles to park, which again is parallel, but this is the actual site that was approved via appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Right, other questions? Who?
Can I ask, I don't know whether I'm permitted to ask this, but does the applicant have a particular disability that would require them to have vehicular access directly adjacent to their property?
The application submitted is a householder application, and they have submitted a fee with the application. If it was for a disabled person, then the fee wouldn't have been incurred, so they haven't indicated that there's any disability requirements there.
Right, Stuart and then Janet.
Going on this, could you tell me how many parking spaces would be lost to gain how many parking spaces on the hard standing?
The Highways Officer will answer this one. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just go to the one where the hard stand? That's the one. Yeah, thanks. You would be able to park a car on that hard stand, but to get in there, you would need to use the space below it to get in, and you would need the space above it to get out. So generally, to gain one space, you lose another two on the highway when you park parallel.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to answer. Thank you.
My question is...
Steve, sorry, it's my fault. Janet was indicated first, then you. Thank you, Janet.
Kate Hatter, Madam Chairman. I was really at a bit of confused when I visited the site, and I felt really sympathetic towards the applicant. But I really had concerns because of the vision of getting out of a plot in there. It worried me how the lack of visibility on both sides could possibly cause a serious accident. So I really had great reservations on this application.
Steve, and then Neil.
On the site visit, I was quite concerned because if the applicant was successful, it was just such a busy road to access in and out of that property. And I had serious reservations of the manoeuvrability in and out of the property.
Neil?
Well, I'm just asking the question, Chair. If I understand, this is not far from a bus shelter.
Yeah.
On that side of the road.
The Highways Officer will come in.
Yes, I'm sure there's a bus stop there, and I think that could create a bit of a jam bottleneck, whether if a bus is parked trying to get out, and people reversing back. It's just an observation I'd like to make, Chair.
Yeah, would you like to come in? Right. Any other questions, comments on this? Stuart?
Recommendation, or please, if may, we go to as recommended. Yeah.
Second that.
There's a seconder, so it's a recommendation of refusal, and a seconder.
Sorry, a recommendation?
Refusal.
Apologies, sir. Recommendation to refuse or recommendation to accept the council officers?
Recommendation to refuse, because that is the officer's recommendation.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Okay, you ready to vote? Those for the recommendation, which is to refuse the application. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. That's right. That looks unanimous. Do you agree with me? Yeah, that's unanimous. That application has been refused. Right, we move on to agenda item 7, application number 18P0128. The proposal is for full application for the construction of an access road, and it's cited at former Meritor site, Grange Road, Llantarnam, Cwmbran. Is on pages 103 to 120. And there was a site inspection here on the 4th of April, and Rebecca McAndrew will give us a presentation. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. Permission sought to construct an access road to serve the future development of this site. A planning application for a sixth form and a mixed-use development is expected over the summer, with an anticipated opening date of September 2012 of the sixth form college. But this application is purely for this access road, and we consider any other application for the future development of this site at a later date when received. The construction of this access would allow the works to start on site of the access, whilst an application for the development of the wider site was under consideration due to tight timescales. So, this is the proposed access road here, but this is just showing it in the context of potential future developments. So the access would come off St David's Road, it would punch through an existing green verge onto Grange Road, and then it would go straight into the southern part of the current site. This shows the access in more detail. So it would come in off St David's Road. It would involve the removal of 11 trees to achieve this. So that would involve trees coming out for this access road to go in. And also there's an existing bus stop in this vicinity, so that would have to be moved further to the north. So that would involve some of that. So you can see that you'd come in, cross over there, and go into the site over Grange Road. It's proposed to stop at Grange Road for vehicles, but pedestrians and cyclists could still pass along that route. And this is just showing the proposed development in the context of sort of the length of Grange Road and St David's Road. So the bus stop, which was here, would be moved up to here, which is closer to Morrison's. The access would come in there over Grange Road into the site. Grange Road would be stopped up and a turning facility would be installed as well on Grange Road for vehicles going in and out of the Meritor site. This is an existing photo of the site, so this is taken off Grange Road, showing where the access would come in here down into the site. Meritor in the background. There you are again looking into the site as it is now. And this is on St David's Road, stood in front of the Grange, looking back across to where the access would be punched through, which is in the vicinity of this lay-by. It goes through there, and those trees would have to come out, and then they go across Grange Road and in. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Questions? Jason, Steve, and Hugh, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. The first one being, are the trees that are being removed going to be replaced elsewhere on the site?
Yeah, we put a condition on the, if consent is granted, to say that a mitigation scheme for the loss of those trees would be required. So we're potentially looking at installing trees in the grass, or planting trees, I should say, in that grass verge band between St David's Road and Grange Road further to the south, so to strengthen the green corridor further south.
Thank you. My second question refers to the sports section that are just neighbouring that site, just to the other side of the tracks. They are desperate for access, as we've discussed previously. Is there any consideration being made for those sporting teams to get vehicular access as part of this development? I'm guessing not, by your face.
The Highways Officer will answer this.
Councillor, I'm sorry about that. That is something I was looking at for you, but from my point, it wasn't specifically related to this particular application. Thank you. But I will look at it and I will get back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, now Jason. Right. Steve is next on the list.
My question is, what will the impact be on the traffic management of the roundabouts at Morrison's?
Highways officer again.
Morrison's always comes up an issue in this particular area. We've actually had the site modelled on what we call a VISM model, and it assesses the impacts of the development on the overall town centre in the larger network, not just Morrison's. Whilst the model says that there will be some impact on the highway network, it is not such a significant impact that you would object to this particular application. What I make members aware of is that Cwmbran is trading really well. And that you will get congestion at particular areas within the town centre at peak times. I know members are concerned about the crossing points. I know members are concerned about the cinema and the crossing point at the cinema. My point always has been that I like to cater for the pedestrian. And there are really good pedestrian links into this development site. There's good pedestrian links from the bus station and the overbridge area. There's a fantastic walkway across the overbridge area. There's a lift and steps that takes you down to the lower level. Then there will be good public realm into this total development eventually. Traffic is just one part of the overall bigger picture. We like to look after pedestrians in the first instance, really. You do get congestion around town centres, and I'm not going to pretend that this won't have some impact on Morrison's roundabout. But for most of the day, that roundabout in that particular area has a limited amount of traffic. It is only in the peak times, generally on a Saturday, round lunch times, round evening, round mornings, that you do get congestion. But in the wider issue and the wider sustainability arguments, there is a bus station nearby, there's a train station nearby, there are fantastic walking links into this particular area. So I'll just make members aware and advise members that when it is not purely just about traffic, it is about all modes of transport and how that sustainability works for our overall development. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I got Hugh first. Stuart. Hugh, would you like to ask a question now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the opening remarks, you stated that the road was just for access to the site, which kind of implied that it was there on a sort of a temporary basis and perhaps would be removed once the site had been developed. But it doesn't appear to be the case. As you further elaborated, it seems to be very permanent if we're talking about removal of trees. That's one of my concerns, again, is the mitigation of cutting down mature trees. I don't know whether the executive or even planning have had a chance to review the recommendations yet from the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee, the Cleaner and Greener, where there was a recommendation put forward that for every tree developer chops down, there should be 2 new ones planted, and if the site wasn't amenable to that, then those 2 trees should be planted elsewhere within the borough on a different site which is amenable. I am slightly confused by this because a couple of applications have gone in for mixed use. We've got a retail food store, petrol filling station. Am I getting confused by, was that the original application that was submitted for Morrison's supermarket, or is that an original application that had gone in for this particular site? Because I understood that it was going to be the new sixth form college, Coleg Gwent, was going to go in there. But on the first slide you had, it seemed to suggest there that there were a number of other plans that had gone in alongside the road, which is in effect going to bisect the site. So the question I had really is, with regards to development opportunities going forward, will this new road have any impact on where Coleg Gwent could be sited and where these other mixed-use, the filling station, hotel and food store, where they can be sited? And are these actually plans there that have already been submitted to planning as part of a pre-planning application process? I'm sorry, that's very long-winded.
Rebecca will explain to us.
Thank you. To start with your first query, yeah, it is a permanent access. So we anticipate that an application for the sixth form college and the wider development will be submitted during the summer. There's quite tight timescales for that. I think they would like to see the sixth form college operational, as I said, September 2020. So if consent is gained today to get that access road, and the construction of that can commence whilst we consider any other applications for the sixth form and the wider development. In terms of tree replacement, our ecologist requires that we now look at not just the number of trees to be removed, but the canopy spread. So you're correct that for every tree that would be removed, we probably expect 2 in its place to reflect the canopy spread of the original tree. And going back to the water gardens there, we did the same there, 2 replacement trees for 1 tree. So you're right there, and that's the way we're working on. And as I said, we're looking at potentially getting those trees planted on land within the council's ownership further down St David's Road, so it's as close as possible, but we'll just strengthen that green barrier. The site history that you're referring to was the Morrison's development, but this part of this site at that time was included within it, so the Morrison's came forward as part of that. But if I just go back to the retail food store and the petrol filling station, freestanding retail unit and the footbridge all came forward as the Morrison site. And then as part of this, it was the hotel, public house, restaurant and offices. But since that time, the plans for the sixth form college have come forward as well. But obviously that would be a future application rather than this application. This plan submitted as part of the application just shows where the proposed access would be in terms of potential future redevelopment. I think this is sort of a draft layout that has been meted around. So on this, the sixth form college would be here. I think the hotel and restaurants would be along here and offices. But obviously, this isn't for consideration at this stage. It's just the access that we're looking at. But this is something that could come forward in this form further along the lines when the application is submitted in the future is submitted. But this access is seen to facilitate the development of the wider site. But obviously the future application we'd have to consider on its own merits. Thank you.
Supplementary, if I may, please, Chair. Thank you for that. You have answered my question. Where I was going with that was the road coming through that particular route bisected the site that was there. You've shown me the preliminary outline plans. Now, that's fine. That's not for consideration today. I understand that. But should the college wish to expand, where would they have in the future? Where would they have the opportunity to further expand?
That would be obviously we haven't got that application in front of us at the moment, so that would be a consideration of a future application.
Okay, Hugh. Stuart now.
Yeah, I got my bicycle back on the road and did actually have a look down there the other day, cycling, walking. I want to ask Paul a few questions, but of course I sort of realised what the questions were. When you come down over, just thinking all the people are going to use this thing potentially, when you come over the Morrison's roundabout, you've got that where you've got to run across the road when all the people are going in and out of Morrison's. That's pretty deadly if you're a cyclist or a pedestrian. You then come over and you've got the bit in front of Morrison's. There's no footpath on the St David's side of the road on that Morrison side. You come inside and then there's the feed of the little road down. So you're talking about using that as a walking and cycling route there. If you go slightly further down, there's a hole in the hedge and there's that set of traffic lights. What I'm not clear is whether that's this side of this new road or that side of the new road. That's number one. That goes over to Llantarnam and Brett Grange, and you've got a nice continuous path all the way down. Now, if you're a pedestrian or a cyclist, you want a nice continuous path. You don't keep swapping from side to side of the road. They're dangerous. Plus the fact you've got to wait for them. That light is a very, very long wait. You can wait something like 5 minutes to get across that thing. That's number one. Number two, if you come back further and get to the light which all the motorists hate, the pedestrian light, which is a very quick light, we like that one. That light, that path obviously is where you're going to get a lot of people coming out on foot or cycling, probably on foot most of the time. That path that goes through it by the CCYP, the Centre for Young People, that's not a proper path through there. What happens is people go round. That needs to be improved if we're going to have a flow into the town centre on that one. One observation. It's almost a temporary path there. There needs something to be done about that. The other point is, if you come up into Morrison's and go up over that new bridge, we had a terrible problem in the snow with that bridge. People were falling down it because the standard of it is very narrow, if you look. I mean, I've got size 12 feet, and anybody's feet smaller, bigger than size 8 feet, are finding that bridge quite difficult to go over. It's very poorly maintained for a bridge of its standard. That's another question. The other point is, the other way of getting across that road is go on slow pedestrian lights and go up through the Llantarnam Bridge. You go up that way. You then come to the top, and what you find is people going across the road into the bus station. You're not supposed to do that, or you can go further up and go through the car park and underneath. Maybe kind of flow, in your language, I suspect, flow distribution of what you do. Is that what you're going to do, or are you going to put some better routes through there? Because some of those are sort of quite hairy.
Please, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are some points I particularly know about the one that comes on the end of the cinema that comes down from the top road down to the bottom, and there's a piece there that it's like a sheep track, for want of a better word, that could be dealt with, but it's not being dealt with as part of this application. What we've got is if you think of people coming from the Cross of Keylog end, for instance, there's a Toucan crossing that's been put on the road there, and you've got a proper cycle footway coming from the north all the way down to that point there. The cycle route then the Toucan crossing takes you across the road onto another cycle route which links over to Cross of Keylog, which comes down, brings you in front of Morrison's, and that, if you look inside the Morrison's car park, there's a cycle pedestrian route through that car park, which then brings you down onto Grange Road, which will remain as a cycleway footway. So that one route is particularly good. I can understand your point about if somebody comes on a cycle across the new walkway in front of the cinema, or fairly new walkway, and then you get to the steps. I wouldn't really think that cyclists would choose that route. They would choose to come around on the footpath around the outside. So there are a number of varying routes. Some of them are good, and some of them need some things doing to them. I think some of them probably would be down to us as a highway authority to look at, but just to bear in mind that there are applications going to be coming in for the future development of this particular site. This is for the access road, and if I could probably have a discussion with you at a later date when those other applications come in, perhaps that would suit. This application is for the access road currently to enable us to get into the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul.
Can I just come for quickly back? Paul, I take your point on that. I probably would pack baits and a pot of paint, I suspect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I hadn't really thought about that, but
before, but Councillor Ashley does raise a very good point regarding the cyclists. Given the nature of this particular facility that will be built there is a college, a sixth form college, it's very likely we will have quite a high percentage of students accessing the site on bicycles. And indeed, I can see from the plan that there is bicycle provision parking that's been made. But with that in mind, can I please ask the highways officer, one, whether there will be a cycle lane along the new road, the side of the new road, for the cyclists to get into the site, or whether there will be connectivity to existing pathways. And the second question really is with regards to the applicant. The applicant is blank, and as we've just got the agent's details, who's actually asked to bring these plans forward? Is it Torvine that is doing it? Because the reason why I'm asking this is when Morrison's was constructed, I understood that Torvine Planning Department insisted that Morrison's improve the highway infrastructure and the access via 106 agreements. And it strikes me that if this is an access road, shouldn't this be constructed as part of any future planning application by the developer? So I want some clarification on that in terms of why this is being put forward now and not being considered as part of when the application goes in for the site to get the developer to pay for the access road, if you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think the highways officer will come in first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Bellin. Regarding the cycle routes to the site, we will look at that as part of the overall development, as I said to Councillor Stuart Ashley earlier. But what I know as part of this application is that there is a good cycle network from the north of the site to bring you into, call it the public realm area, which is the area fronting Morrison's. So then that public realm area, I anticipate, will continue down to the frontage of the development, i.e. the sixth form college. That will then, public realm will link into the rest of the development at a lower level, affording good pedestrian cycle access into the development overall. If you are cycling from the south of the development, there's opportunity to cycle on the access road into the development. And to be honest, there is nothing wrong with sharing a road as a cyclist, which happens in a lot of instances. But the main access into this development is via the public realm area, and there's good ways in. So, but we will look at that as part of the wider development when we get the planning applications in. With regard to the access road into the development site, this has been put forward because they need to ensure that it's in place for the college to come forward, because the college is coming forward at an early date. It is an unfortunate situation sometimes that if you don't know who's developing the next phases, how do you get them to pay for those phases, or how do you get them to pay for their access road in? The bottom line is that the sixth form college needs that road to get into their development. In future, how they equalise that out with whoever builds on that land is another issue, but as it stands, because you need to get into your development, and that is generally always the thing that happens, you need to put that access in. Otherwise, you don't build your development.
Thank you. Yeah, so I really appreciate the answer given to the first question in terms of the public domain and the connectivity. I think that is going to be important given the nature of the establishment. The second one, I think, the second answer, well, I say it is what it is, but I think given it's probably Welsh Government decision, the length of time we had to wait for getting the funding go ahead for the University Grange Hospital in the magnitude of 3 years, and it might be that just by the nature of this establishment there might be a quicker decision taken, but
it's almost a preemptive thing, isn't it? We've got to do this to accommodate any time frames that they might come up with.
Okay, now who?
Is that the case?
The case is that the school needs to be developed, and to get into the school you need an access. I can in all honesty say what would happen with whoever develops that future land and what contributions they may make to what. But my guess is that within the development of the school, the people that are developing that have taken the costs of the roadworks to get you in, just down into that site, into the cost of the development. And that I would expect any developer to do if they needed that development, not knowing, or the other parties not being involved at the time, or needing to be involved or wanting to be involved at that stage. So I'm afraid in this instance, it is that if we need, or if the sixth form needs to go there, at early stages, that road needs to go in, and it's usually that development will swallow the cost of that road. Thank you. Sorry.
So there's no other access to the site then currently?
Richard will come in.
I just need to point out really that as from a planning point of view, who pays for the access is not really relevant to the development. We're not looking at that as serving the post-16 because that's not an application that's come in yet, nor has it got any approval. But it's not uncommon to have an access to facilitate a future development site that has had outline permission previously. And it's a vacant site that we want to see developed between Morrison's and Meritor. So hopefully that access will act as a catalyst for that development. The timing, again, from a planning point of view, isn't a determining issue. We will look at the merits of that and decide it on its own merits. That's the best access for the site. But the future development, it will be a future application that members will then have to determine at that stage. Just wanted to clarify from the planning point of view, that's all. Does that make sense to?
Yeah, I get that from a planning point of view, but from a financial perspective, it's Torfaen that will be paying for it, and Torfaen residents that will be paying for the new access road to be built. And with the Morrison scheme, obviously I know it's a private company, but they in effect funded their access under the 106. And I wondered whether there might be a similar arrangement in place with the Education Authority, for example, for them to pay if they were building the new college.
I think just to confirm that those aspects are not really part of our planning consideration. The funding and how all that happens is going to be, the decisions for that will be made elsewhere, and Welsh Government are also involved in that. So that won't really be anything that we would need to look at to determine this application.
Okay, right, two people have indicated, Janet and then Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I share other councillors' concerns about the traffic, especially around the Morrison's roundabout. But I think that if we do not agree to accept the proposals with the recommendations in front of us, it could have a detrimental effect on future plans for that site, which could include the sixth form college, which we are desperate for. So it's my recommendation that we go ahead with the planning and accept it with conditions.
Right, thank you, Janet. That was a proposal. Is there?
That's what I wanted to do.
Oh, you wanted to second that? Right. There's a seconder. So we've had a proposal and a seconder to approve this application. Could you indicate, please, with your hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, that's unanimous. That application has been approved. Okay. Right, we go to agenda item 8, which is application number 18P0153, and the proposal is for variation of condition 2 of planning permission 17/P/0561 for at least I think it's for full FUL, is that right? For replacement school relating to removal of sixth form accommodation, site address Crossacaliog Comprehensive School, Woodland Road, Crossacaliog, Cumbran, is on pages 121 to 123. 34, and Rebecca McAndrew is going to give us a short presentation on this. Thank you, Rebecca again.
Thanks again. So, as you'll know, consent for a new school at the Crossy Kellogg Comprehensive School site was granted back last September 2017. Since that time, the Welsh Government have approved plans for a new central sixth form. So the current application is to vary the original consent to make amendments to the original scheme. The main amendment is the removal of the sixth form area from the originally approved scheme. There's some minor landscaping changes that are mainly associated with that amendment, and some minor changes to the main building, basically a few window alterations and changes to the colour of the clad, and I think it was meant to be lime green before, and I was going for sort of shades of blue and green. So if I show you the bottom scheme is the approved scheme, so I thought it'd be easy just to compare and contrast. And the top one is the proposed scheme. So this is where the sixth form block area was on the approved scheme, and you can see here that chunk there's gone. There's some amendments to the landscaping to the access point off Woodland Road, so you can see there compared to there. Also, the parking levels on the proposed scheme are lower than the approved scheme to reflect the reduction in the level of pupils at the school. So this is the main car park here on the original scheme, which included 139 car parking spaces. On the proposed amendment, that goes down to 105 car parking spaces. And also on the approved scheme, there were 34 drop-off spaces. And on the proposed amendment, there's 26 drop-off spaces. This does facilitate a larger green buffer between Turnpike Road and the Old County Hall roundabout. So there's amendments to the landscaping there, which is seen as a positive. This is the building that was previously the sports facility, the hub and the sixth form block, and this is what it would look like now, so it sits quite comfortably in the context of the main school. And the Highways Officer's happy with the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Hugh?
Yes. It basically is an amendment to a planning application that's already been approved with a condition that, or a removal of accommodation. Where is this accommodation going? I mean, or is it deemed now that there's no requirement for it?
This ties in with sort of earlier discussions, because the sixth form will no longer be required in the new school, and we're looking to have a central sixth form potentially on the previous site we looked at. Pupils would now go to the central sixth form rather than to Crossy Kellogg sixth form, so that facility within the school would go, and it would just be a 11 to 16 school.
Okay, Hugh, with that?
It's a bit difficult, really, because we haven't had a formal application submitted yet for the plans for the new site. So we're being asked to withdraw accommodation facilities without really being given an assurance that the plans for the new site, when it goes ahead, would include sufficient accommodation facilities, and I'm a little bit concerned by that, to be honest. I can see the rationale behind it, obviously, in that it was moving from one site to another site, so why build the accommodation? But without assurances that we're going to get the accommodation built on the new site, and we haven't got that yet because the plans haven't been submitted.
No, the plans haven't been submitted, but I am pretty sure that the Assembly has indicated that they will support Torfaen with the new sixth form college. Does that answer your question?
It does, to a degree, but not in terms of the accommodation aspect.
Can I bring another member in to ask a question? Steve?
Can I propose we take the officer's recommendation for approval?
Right. We've had a recommendation for approval, or a proposal for approval, and it's been seconded. Hugh, do you want to come in now before we take the vote on anything?
If you'll permit me, Chair, it's just a minor point, but the report says that the school themselves have approached the local education authority about retention of the accommodation, which throws a spanner in the works for, I'm thinking, what's the rationale behind that?
Richard will come in and explain that to you.
It's probably a question for education. We've got the application before us. They've already got the approved scheme for the bigger accommodation. That's already approved, so they could build that. This is an alternative, but in place there will be 2 planning permissions. So from the Education Authority's point of view, they would be able to choose which one they implement ultimately. That's my understanding anyway. So we are just granting, or if members grant planning permission for this, this gives them the other option, depending then on what happens to the on the other sites.
Okay, right, are we ready to vote on this now for approval? Can I have a show of hands? And that's unanimous. So this application has been approved. Thank you. And that concludes the Planning Committee meeting for today. I thank the officers for their presentations and their patience in answering questions, and I thank the committee for their questions. I close the meeting.